Well, Simon, thanks for joining me. You're in London today, aren't you?
I was in London yesterday, actually a couple of days ago, and I was attending a really good conference that's focused on water, but the world of water, not just the water companies, everyone that uses water and creates wastewater. So yeah, really interesting, really good.
Provide some interesting context for this conversation then.
It might well do.
So after the last 2 years, AI has arrived in the workplace. The media, big tech marketing, they're all telling us a story, the same story really, about what this means and what's happening in various organizations around the country and around the world. But from what I see, I think you've actually got a really unique vantage point. And today I want to understand really what you're seeing and how different organizations are reacting. Is there experimentation going on? Are people freezing with fear? Are they pretending nothing's happening? And when you think about, regulated industries as well, the assumption is always, that tension of innovation versus compliance, speed versus safety, curiosity versus risk. Um, you've worked, around the world, really. It's not just limited to the UK. You get to see inside different organizations, regulated environments where culture, governance, risk appetite is all variable. And I would imagine shapes everything about how they approach change. And so when you look across, different regions and different types of organization right now, you know, who do you think looks most comfortable with AI and the related change, and kind of who looks most anxious? Are you able to kind of give us a bit of a map of the landscape?
Yeah, yeah, I can do. Who's most comfortable? Now that's an interesting one because I think a lot of the work we do will be with water companies, wastewater companies, and their regulatory bodies as well. So typically governments. And as you quite rightly say, they are traditionally risk adverse. And in the UK, despite what you might read in the press, we do have arguably joint best drinking water quality in the world. And that's driven by a real depth of scientific understanding and regulation and compliance and checking again. So, in that respect, when you think about those industries and their appetite to embrace AI, there is quite rightly a very high degree of caution, a very high degree, going right the way through to wastewater treatment processes where you might expect, and they do use some elements of machine learning to optimize process performance. There's a lot more that could be done with AI in that space. But again, quite rightly, incredibly conservative, incredibly conservative. So if I looked at the actual adoption curve for AI in water and wastewater, I would say it's quite a gentle curve. I'm seeing some companies starting to use AI enabled software solutions for things like leak detection. So that'd be the obvious one. So if you can imagine a drinking water network in your town, in your village, that network will have a percentage of leakage across it. Joints fail, materials fail with age over time. AI tools are now widely available to be able to help pinpoint where to look for leaks. So you're reducing your workforce effort on site. You're better able to deploy people into areas, into streets, into roads where you are more likely to find a leak and therefore be able to fix it. So those tools are out there now. They've been out there for a good few years, and there's some real pioneers in that space, and there's some new entrants as well. And because they are not directly influencing drinking water quality, and they're not impacting wastewater discharges and compliance, there's a bit more scope for them to be used for people to, as you say, become more comfortable with them. So they are out there now. They are being quite widely used. So I would say certainly in developed countries, you would expect AI tools relating to leak detection to be available and used more and more. So they would be sort of further up that adoption curve. Um, it's a very risk adverse sector, very risk adverse.
Yeah. So is there something of maybe a Chinese wall between the things which are deemed safety critical and standard business operations? Where if it's critical, if there's a risk, an obvious risk attached to it, it's slowly, you know, take gentle steps. We've got to be absolutely sure that this is not going to make things worse. But everywhere else, is it very much like any other organization who are just experimenting with new tools and new ways of being efficient?
I think you're right. As a sector and in utilities in general, you'd be thinking about the terms of critical national infrastructure in the UK. So if it's critical national infrastructure, you have to be incredibly cautious. It's critical national infrastructure for a good reason. It's designed to keep us, people, running, healthy, hopefully happy in pretty serious circumstances. So the critical national infrastructure piece, yes, if it's critical national infrastructure, there's going to be a high degree of risk adverseness and a lot of trialing and proving before adopting anything, absolutely anything. Then you are right. There's the rest of it, and I think leak detection is quite a good example where it is on infrastructure, it's drinking water infrastructure, but at that stage you're not touching it. You're not physically touching that water. You're using AI-driven solutions to pinpoint where your effort needs to go much more effectively. Hence, it's further up that adoption curve.
I mean, the impression that we get and the assumption that I think many of us have is the UK is a bit slow in uptaking new things and exploring new technology, particularly in this kind of space. From what you've seen in other regions and other places in the world, is that fair? Is the UK slower than everybody else?
I Are we slower? I don't think so. I don't think so. It can appear that way. That's because my focus is mostly on water and wastewater. We're heavily regulated and driven by those regulations. So we look for regulation to change to drive us to do things differently. Now, uh, are we therefore slower than other countries? I would say in general, we're probably just a bit more thorough and again, risk adverse. And that's because we've got decades worth of experience to fall back on that says, in general, we've been doing the right thing. We haven't always got it right. We've made mistakes and there's a lot of work to fix those now. But in general, we've kept people healthy. And that's the number one priority. The pace of change in this space, I've been thinking about this. And there's an element about regulation, but there's another part about how our clients are procuring services. So in our world, a lot of engineering consultancy is procured effectively on time and materials. So what's your person's rate that you're selling at? How much time do they need to perform a task? And are there any other additional material costs? And you add them together and effectively that's the price. And if you then internally in your business bring in an AI-based system to automate, to streamline and make you more efficient, because it's probably around an efficiency gain that you're going to be looking, you've got to be able to realize that efficiency. So, for example, if a person was given a day's work and it's £1,000 a day, and that individual with AI tools could complete that work in half a day, great. You think you've saved £500. You've not. You've got to resell that £500 to another project. You've got to redistribute. You've got to diversify. You've got to have a stack of work that you can churn through so you can realize those efficiency gains. But the sector, and a lot of sectors are like this, are still procured in a similar way. And it can still be fixed price. But internally, we're building up that price from people time, scheduler rates, and any other materials. So you've got to really look at your internal processes and how to redistribute that effort where you get those gains. For it to properly translate, client side needs to look at how they procure. And you can't just procure flippantly by saying, well, in your tender, we'd love to see some AI tools coming in. I mean, that's just not going to work. It needs a real depth of thinking to understand from a client side what they want to see from their consultants. Um, so there's an element of the clients needing to lead the way. If you are on a framework where you are paid time and materials, where is your incentive to become more efficient? Unless you're quite a big business and you've got other packages of work in other sectors and you can move that additional resource around and deliver more work with the same headcount in your business. So just coming back to the pace bit, there is a procurement aspect in that as well. When I work overseas, there are different procurement practices. You can work in some countries and they will direct award. So efficiency is everything, highly competitive. You can get situations where you can get direct award. There's all kinds of different procurement methods that that are probably not as robust as the UK, but will enable companies that have AI solutions as part of their offering to really take a step forward.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think we're in a phase now, also everyone's talking about the technology and what it can do and how amazing it is and the change that it's driving. But I think not that many people have noticed yet that it's not just changing working practices. It's actually changing the dynamic of how organizations interact with each other, commercial models, working practices, all that kind of stuff is all wrapped up in this. And unless we're able to somehow get to a point where we can reshape all of it, we're not going to realize the benefits, and we're going to be held back. I think what you've noticed there, what you've highlighted, is actually happening across all professional services, across all consultancies of all types, because we've always just stuck to the old industrial model. We sell time for money. The value exchange is time, and that value exchange is essentially collapsing, as you quite rightly pointed out. Now, clients want their consultancies to bring the innovation, and quite rightly, capitalism says, well, things will get cheaper and more efficient over time. But there's got to be a conversation had so that there is a genuine value exchange that makes sense. Otherwise, consultancies will continue to try and sell time, which means they won't pass on the efficiency gains and the opportunity that's come with the technology, or they'll just cease to exist because the amount of time it takes to do certain tasks is not worth the value anymore. So it is a really interesting tension that's happening here, and I like the idea that you suggested is actually there's a leadership that needs to come from the procurement side on the client rather than all of the innovation coming from the consultancies.
Yes, there needs to be a big change in procurement because of this, because of AI and what it can bring, and also to protect those organizations. If you might want to use traditional but highly proven engineering design procedures and methodologies to deliver a certain project. So the client should be specifying that, saying, I don't want you to automate this. I know it's old school, but it is really robust. And the nature of what we're doing, I don't want that risk. Versus another project or a different client, a different sector, they might go, yeah, we've looked at this. We understand it as well. There is an appetite for a slightly elevated risk approach, and it needs management and it needs governance, but they might be prepared to take it in exchange for financial gains at cheaper price or faster delivery, however you play it. I think we need to remember that in science and engineering, which is most of my background, we are traditionally still really risk adverse. Really risk adverse. And the research that we do can use AI tools to really help, but we really want to see the detail behind it. We need to lift the lid and really get under the bonnet. But there are some really good examples though of where probably let me share this example. A few years ago, I was talking to a company that used a lot of machine learning and some really clever AI to speed up the outline design for wastewater treatment processes. So if you can imagine you want to think about building a new wastewater treatment plant or expanding an existing one, changing it, modifying it, you probably want to do a lot of optioneering. Now, traditionally, engineers would go to site, measure up what's already there. Yes, you've got Google Maps and all the rest of it to take images, Google Earth, and you can start to scale things. And you would be running calculations. Yes, using software. We're not back to just using Excel or calculators. So there's software, there's modeling software to do all of this. That's great. And over the course of several weeks, 8, 9, 10, 12 weeks maybe, you'd be able to go from a starting point to having a series of costed options for what to do with that plant and process, typically to meet the requirements of a new housing development, expansion of a town, etc. So this software was developed and basically to automate that, Rob. So there's an element of AI in it, machine learning and general automation, and it can be predominantly done from a desktop. And you can pretty much spend a day inputting data with a small team of you working together in almost like a workshop environment. The software does its thing overnight, come back the following day, and you've got your first option done. And that includes full plant list, preliminary plant layout, all of the equipment, kilowatt ratings for pumps and carbon calcs, and coming soon, I believe, will be costing as well. So you've
Right.
gone from weeks to days, um, and they are now selling into the UK, and they're getting uptake, they're getting traction. Go back a couple of years, that was a hard start for them, really hard, because you're going from a team of people working on something for 10, 12 weeks and being paid by the day through
Mhm.
to completing the tasks in maybe a week or 2 weeks. So that that's a real world example of where some of this technology can have real benefits, but the adoption of that is really difficult, really difficult. Again, if you are a consultancy, do you make your consultancy even more efficient by adopting this software? But then all of a sudden you've got to backfill 8 weeks of work because the team is now available for those 8 weeks. That's quite brave.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a risk where a lot of this AI innovation just creates a faster hamster wheel. You know, you have to fill it with more stuff. It's creating space, but that's not giving you more leisure time. That's giving you more work to find. And that's definitely and there's a cultural question we all need to have around what that looks like and how we take that forward. So yeah, interesting because obviously the clients want to save money, right? So they want it to happen faster or cheaper. That makes a lot of sense. But there's got to be a conversation somewhere, I suppose, about, or we need to find where the value is. That's
Yeah,
really challenging. So you mentioned the framework situation there. When a new organization comes in with a new product like that, is it easier now for them to get into a framework-led procurement than it once was? Because a lot of these frameworks are 3 years, 5 years. They're put in place long before the technology has matured for them to engage with the kind of changes that are available. And also, right now, things are advancing so fast that if your framework was launched even 18 months ago, everyone's now dealing with a different deck of cards, and your framework deals with the wrong. RC's asking the wrong questions, so they're offered or added the wrong consultancies or whatever. Is that dynamic changing? That framework dynamic?
I don't think so yet. For the services that I think are most likely to be optimized, improved, etc., with the development of AI solutions. So hence that comes back to the pace point you made earlier, of that it is a bit slow for good reason. The frameworks are really important. They do, if they're done well, they bring a lot of advantages. They bring a lot of cost certainty if you use the right contractual framework. They can allow businesses to recruit and have staff retained for sort of 5 year period. They help, I think, build relationships, because you tend to find that the framework team are either fully integrated or semi-integrated with the utility, and they build good collaborative working relationships. It's really good to see. So there's a lot of good that comes from those long-term frameworks if they're structured correctly. But there are barriers, and the barriers are really focused on new techniques in general, new technology in general, AI coming in. If you've got that framework structured, where's the incentive to change? There's going to have to be change, I think, in that framework approach to really capitalize on AI. It's not going to be anytime soon, I don't think, not in the UK.
So I guess the that framework environment and the environment that we exist in with the UK is quite UK centric and has its benefits and has its difficulties as you've mentioned. How does that reflect elsewhere in the world? How do they operate, and does that enable them to experiment and innovate faster?
Yes, so a lot of my work over the last few years have been in the Middle East, so that's where I can speak about that experience. And there seems to be less long-term frameworks in that region. So there are frameworks for sure, but it might only be for a couple of years. So again, that gives a bit more flex, bit of opportunity there. Um, there's a lot of engineering design happening in the Middle East. There's so much development and growth happening in that region, and it's a highly competitive market, highly competitive. With all the international consultancies, predominantly have got a base somewhere in the Middle East, and they're all out competing for the next road, the next school, the next hospital, the next water treatment plant. So in that competitive design and build environment, particularly on the design side, that would be my focus. Um, that's where any tools you can use that are compliant to make you more efficient, to bring the price down, Absolutely. That's win, win, win. And I think that's where, bear in mind when I talk about engineering consultancy, many of, or the majority of engineering consultants would be global now. There are smaller ones, of course, that would be just UK based, but the big ones are multinationals. So they'll have a footprint in one country that is 5-year frameworks, a bit slower to move, but they might be on a highly competitive design and build project in the Middle East, where that allows them, drives them through competition. It drives them to actually have to look at these tools and have to implement them and realize the efficiencies to win the work and to continue to perform in that market.
Yeah, okay. So is it more about then where a particular market is and its is maturity the right word? There's lots of the work going on in the Middle East, for example, has happened over the last, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 years. The stuff in the UK has obviously been going for, well, 100 years or more. And it's in a very different phase of its evolutionary cycle in terms of expectations, infrastructure. It's not in that brand new greenfield design and build, innovate stage. Is it that that's driving people's approach to it more than just, well, the Brits are a bit risk averse and the Saudis or the Emiratis are a bit more gun ho?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think so. It's that, and nations that are, yeah, where they haven't got, countries that haven't got that history behind them. Yeah, as you quite rightly say, 100+ years. Well, we are WRC. Our business is going to turn 100 years old next year, 2027. So we've been doing it a long time, and we weren't the start of it. Uh, Other nations, you quite rightly say, you look at the Emirates as just over 50 years old, effectively in its current form with all the big development that happened. Yes, I think those countries that are still developing at pace have a significant opportunity to step change and to realize the value. We are always going to be, as a highly developed nation with a very mature infrastructure, we are going to be slower for sure. It's that analogy, isn't it? Those countries that are only really now rolling out extensive cellular, they're not going to go 2G, 3G, 4G. They're going to go for the latest technology. And that will be the same, I think, with engineering design.
So I guess in the UK then, if it's less about general Britishness, is it more about individual leaders within organizations who are able to create an environment for change, for reducing friction, for innovation? Is that still true even in these critical national infrastructure businesses?
Yeah, I think it is. I think there's a big leadership component, to be able to help develop the internal culture in our engineering consultancy businesses. The culture in these businesses, it's not a bad culture at all. But to move from where we are into this new way of working with new tools, that requires some significant leadership and trying to explain to really clever, brilliant people that there is now an AI solution. I'm not really worried. I don't think people are worried about their jobs. Not the kind of people that we employ are really skilled people. I don't think they're worried about retaining their jobs. They're just risk adverse. So you've got to be able to work at a leadership level to somehow articulate that need to have some confidence in these new approaches, and then articulate how we're going to protect the business from that
Mm.
potentially increased risk. What guardrails are you going to put in place, and how do you even think about doing that? Because it is one thing, going back to what I said at the start, it's one thing using transcripting and some AI to generate some notes and actions from a meeting. You kind of think there probably should be some guardrails around that, but it's not significant. You try and talk about pioneering scientific research or detailed engineering design, and you're using different AI enabled applications. Because we're not talking about one, we could be talking about a few, each with their own unique task. And how do you govern those? Coming back to that leadership piece, leadership needs to have that confidence as well and that depth of understanding. And how do you get that depth of understanding? And you've probably seen it more than me, Rob, but I'm inundated with various courses from various different institutions in the UK and internationally selling you transformational AI leadership courses. a significant price. Should I do one? Would it make a
I
difference?
think
I don't know.
there's a lot of snake oil around. I think you need to. You're quite rightly wary. I think of some of those. It's interesting there because I think, as you say, the default for the individuals within such businesses is to be risk averse by default. That's kind of what's drawn them to the role, drawn them to the organization, drawn them to the industry. It's full of risk averse people. Um, and they generally speaking respond to fellow risk averse people. They don't take people taking risks very lightly or take them very seriously, I'd imagine. It downgrades the opinion of those individuals. But you need a certain element of risk taking to be an effective leader. Anyone in any leadership position knows that there are very few black and white, right and wrong answers. You're often dealing with the grey and reaching into the unknown and having to make a decision on something. And you live and die on the calls that you make. So there's an inherent sense of risk in being an effective leader. Um, how yeah, I'm not sure what the question is, but I think for the first time I'm realizing the difficulty in being an effective leader in a very risk averse sector and an organization. You say quite rightly so. I mean, have you seen some good examples of kind of where it has worked? Maybe you're able to name names, maybe you're not, but is there a dynamic that kind of works where you've kind of got effective, appropriate risk taking in leadership that's well respected by the organization that they're leading?
The simple answer is not yet. I'm thinking about AI in general. I'm focusing in this on AI, not leadership in general. What I'm starting to see though is that there is a type of organization that I think are more likely to be ahead of this curve, with that leadership being able to take perhaps a more informed risk-based decision, slightly elevated level of risk. And that is, I think, when I mentioned about consulting and research, I'm thinking in general about quite big companies, the big, what we call tier one consultancies that sit on long-term frameworks. There are, of course, a load of other smaller consultancies, more niche. So we're not talking hundreds and thousands of people. We're talking 20, 30, 40, 50 people. Those types of organizations, typically privately owned, um, grown fairly much organically, probably have to cherry pick where they work as well because they're in demand. Those type of organizations, the smaller leadership teams are much more able to get their arms around their whole business and everyone in it, and therefore really understand the depth of what's happening every single day. And I think better able then to assess the risk and bring in AI enabled solutions into that and be able to realize, because they're relatively small in number, efficiency for those size businesses is really, really important. So I think there are a group of leaders out there that are in smaller consultancies that I think have great potential, not only to look at these new tools and to bring them in and implement them, but to also really manage that risk and that cultural change. Just because when you know yourself, when you're trying to get anything new, change in your business, it's really hard in traditional businesses. But if you're a small leadership team and you can still get your arms around 30, 40, 50 people, that's a very different environment to manage than 250 as we are now. To a bigger consultancy will have 15, 20,000 people globally or even bigger. So there's definitely a group that I'm thinking will be ahead of the curve in this space.
Mm. But we do see some good examples of people trying things within larger organizations. I think where we first met, maybe 10 years ago, maybe longer. I think it was Northumbrian Water Innovation Festival. I think it was Northumbrian, and it was like it was a couple of days worth of an event. It was a bit of a hippie commune, really, and people, showing off new ideas and working together on new experiments, doing little hack day type things, and we were working. Actually, even back then, we were working together on a little machine learning thing before AI was cool. But obviously Northumbria, very big organisation. right in the heart of all of this critical national infrastructure, regulated stuff, all this stuff we've been talking about, just like any other water company. But they created this thing which didn't feel culturally like that. They somehow created a little bubble of opportunity, of innovation, of excitement, of something which, as far as I would guess, is culturally distinct. I mean, I don't know them as an organization at all. Maybe the whole organization is like that. But it wasn't what you would expect if you were walking into a water company, for example. Is that I mean, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but from your experience, is that quite unique, that kind of approach, or are there bits of that all over the place?
That's the that approach on that scale is really unique. I mean, the Northumbrian Innovation Festival continues to be award winning, actually, recognized and copied now internationally with agreement. So that format, um, the number of different diverse businesses involved, including, for example, the likes of Microsoft and other big globals, heavily involved. And all credit to Northumbrian. The work they've done year after year to deliver that is pioneering. It is truly different and continues to attract delegates, people to get involved with the various sprints that they run, and also really a real diverse range of sponsors and exhibitors as well. So that is definitely rare. That's definitely rare. They quite rightly developed that and commanded that space. However, when you go into water companies, and I do this, they are vibrant places to work. They are bringing in new platforms, new technology all the time, and more have an automated and or an AI component to it. So it is there. It's not a lot of what you see there. It's not scaled fully yet. So it's not to say there aren't projects happening, because there are more and more, not necessarily scaled. So there's a lot of, I mean, yeah, the technology, a lot of these solutions, there's a lot of brilliant thinking and development done that could be scaled really quickly. But again, we are in a 5-year effectively framework-led procurement cycle. Um, we're in the UK, so we're driven by regulation. So control of what you do, both in terms of spend, is really important, but also you've got to, anything you do in the water sector, you need to demonstrate that you're going to hit your regulatory performance commitments as well. So there's a lot of factors still there that for good reason, but the water companies have to comply with, which might delay fully scaling one of these solutions. But the solutions are there, and the sector is vibrant. It is full of those solutions. I was at a conference, in London on Wednesday this week, and again, solution providers there, people from outside the water sector, not that many water companies there. It's mostly users of water and generators of wastewater. Companies, investors, international investors attending, and they have big portfolios of tech for water and wastewater that they've invested in over many years. So when you look at it through that lens, it is really vibrant. I think the bit that the technology developers, the solution providers want to see now is they can do the pilot, they can do the first project for sure. It's the scale from there. It's that scale up piece. It's less startup, more scale up.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, you've painted a picture that there's a real willingness within regulated industries in general for innovation, for change, for bringing new opportunity, for experimentation. But there's a backdrop of cultural restraint, either because the individuals that making it up, and that's just their natural predisposition, and the fact that they're dealing with life and death stuff. Like, there's a reason they're regulated. It's very important. That restraint is really important. Do you have, and obviously you guys are our service provider to these industries. This is what you do. Do you have any advice, I guess, for anyone else looking to try and enable innovation and experimentation within a regulated space?
That's a really good question. What would I advise them to do? I think there's an element of needing to be, if you are sat in a utility, and the utilities have really good innovation teams. I don't think I'm saying anything out of turn, that they would probably be saying, right, we've got to really work hard on our business case. We've really got to understand, you want to come in with new technology, a new process, some way of optimizing something. Brilliant. What is that business case? And I think testing that business case quickly is really important. Stakeholder engagement within utilities, again, you can have people that focus on innovation, but there's a whole other business. That could be quite a small team sat in a business of thousands. You've got a lot of stakeholder engagement to do internally to really get people on board with change. And as we were saying earlier, that there is a risk adverse piece to that as well. So I think this was said on Wednesday as well at the conference. The technology and quite a lot of the sort of the AI platform based tools, Rob, a lot of that is there. It's not quite a full supermarket, but it's certainly fairly full. And if you are the water company going shopping, there's almost everything you need is there. And when I mean there, it's commercially available and ready to scale, or pre-commercial, but it's done a lot. It's done a lot of trials. It's been around a long time. So if that supermarket of solutions is predominantly there, then I think there's an onus on the utilities to look and go, how do we deliver this? How do we integrate this? How do we buy it? But it's a complex network, Rob. Yeah,
Mm.
we're protecting public health and the health of the environment. That's the sector. And bring it back to the pace thing. If we think sometimes utilities in the UK can be a bit slow, the change can take a while. It could take a whole regulatory cycle. It could take 5 years.
So if there's anyone listening now that's, I guess, maybe feeling a little bit behind, that they're not moving fast enough, that there's not enough change, there's not enough innovation, not enough experimentation. Have you got anything for them? Should they be worried?
Think about running a diverse portfolio where your solutions might be applicable to perhaps a water company or wastewater company in the UK. Think about where you could take it into Europe or other countries at the same time. So give a bit of diversification. Could your solution be provided to another sector in the UK? Again, to give you a bit of diversification there. Funding and networking. Water companies are really open. They've all got innovation teams. There are emails you can use and they will connect with you. You've got to chip away at it, but they really do want to see ideas coming through. They really do. And they're good people working really hard. You've got innovation funding through Ofwat for the regulator in the UK. So there are millions and millions of pounds available via competition, but it's there. It is genuinely available. And you've got solutions such as WRC Portfolio that we run, which are collaborative research programs where we work with solution providers, tech developers to demonstrate to industry that technology will have benefits so we can help facilitate pilot trials and other bits and pieces. It's definitely a don't give up. The sector needs that innovation, needs those solutions to come through. There is funding. There is definitely funding. There's lots of funding routes. And like all these things, particularly if you're a startup, it's hard work. You can't hide from that. Startup is really hard. Scale up is hard for different reasons. You've got to keep
Mm.
chipping away at it. But it is once you've got your solution tested, developed, and if there's an approval process as well, we do a lot of work with helping with companies with regulatory approval. Once you've got that, and you've proved yourselves, it will scale. If it's doing the job, word will spread. People will want to talk to you. They will come to you saying, "Oh, I've heard about this. Tell us more." So yeah, the message would be stick with it because it is worth it in the end. Just try and run a diversified development plan.
And what do you think, if what do you see organizations when you look at them? What mistakes do you think they're making now that they're going to regret in 3 years' time?
I suspect the pace of change with respect to the impacts of climate will catch us out. So by that, I mean, the industry's critical national infrastructure do have very advanced plans in place to deal with the impact of climate change, which is, in the world of water, you've either got too much or too little. Too much, flooding; too little, drought. What did we have last summer? Drought. What do we got at the moment outside my window? Flooding. So I think climate change, the impacts are moving at a pace faster then we can build additional resilience to protect those assets. And don't forget, whilst this conversation I've mostly been talking about water companies, utilities in general, and consultancies building things, there's a whole world outside of water companies. The water companies do a great job of what they do, but there's everyone else that uses water as a component of the product that they're making. So food and drink would be an obvious one, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, education, transport. All of these sectors use water, and the impact of climate change will hit them as well. So I think the pace of change, that's going to be the bit that I think we really need to focus on. We'll see how this summer goes, but I think we really need to focus on. And of course, you might be aware of when I talk about the world of water, I mean the world of water beyond water companies and regulators, everyone that uses water and creates wastewater. There is probably the biggest ever gathering of that world of water taking place in Glasgow this October, the 4th to the 8th, and that's the International Water Association World Water Congress. So a bit of a plug there, worldwatercongress.org. But beyond the plug, that's the serious piece where utilities and regulators and governments from all over the world, there's 10,000 people over those days attending, get together with agriculture, aquaculture, automotive, manufacturing, food and drink, pharmaceutical, healthcare, education, transport, etc., all those sectors together because they are all interlinked. They're absolutely interlinked. And the only way we're going to be ready for what's coming at us is if we actually get that conversation going and try and drive that agenda a bit more.
And it's much being said about the water requirements of the AI explosion. There's servers somewhere being
Yeah,
cooled.
absolutely, Rob. Yeah, yeah, it's in the press. We don't want a data center in our backyard because it's going to steal all our water. So the reality is those data centers need cooling, and water is the obvious choice for that. There are different ways of cooling a data center. You can put cold water in and you get warmer water out, and it's quite wasteful. You can do closed circuit, much like air conditioning with a refrigerant based system. You can have glycol systems. The more complex you get, the more the data center investment costs. So the longer the repayment. Yeah. It's as simple as that. I think quite rightly, it's made the media. So people are going, "Oh, hang on a second, how are we going to get the water for this data center?" Of that, I mean, I've got a funny feeling there's something like 90 centers already in planning in the UK, 96 data centers, something like that, out of a pile of about 400. They all need water, but those developers also know that if the water's not available, they'll find another way to do it. And
Yeah,
most important thing to think about is the quality of water that's used. So we traditionally, in the UK, we just have drinking water or wastewater, typically. Now, the water that you need to cool a data center with, you're never going to drink, that's for sure. So you can use rainwater harvesting. You can use treated effluent. So that is treated wastewater to a very high standard, but not quite high enough for drinking. That's available. That's available. So why not use that? So your method by which you cool the data center, and if you do use water, there are solutions where you don't need the most expensive high quality water, i.e. drinking water. You can use a lower grade water, which offers significant benefits, both in terms of cost, but also for the environment.
yeah. I guess that impacts where you build them as well. If that's the route, then you want to build them next to a treatment plant or a reservoir, right?
And that's exactly what they'll be wrestling with at the moment, Rob. Yeah, ideally, you'd build them with next to a wastewater treatment plant that also had some population nearby that perhaps wanted to have a waste heat network. So hot waste, perhaps you could use the waste heat for something else, or it's an agricultural area, so they're using it to heat greenhouses. That's the circular piece, and it's not new, that circularity. Data centers hit the news a few weeks ago. They'll continue to pop up because it's the next shiny thing to have a look at and be the focus of media attention. We need to just be mindful that there are solutions for those that use a lot less water. It's going to cost a bit more, but it could be the next shiny diversion that takes us away from the core issues. Don't forget, of course, data center uses a lot of electricity. And that power all uses water. People don't mention that. Power generation uses a lot of water, a lot of water.
Yeah.
So it's not just the direct water used for cooling, it's the power gen as well.
So you're reassuring us then that despite what the media says, the grown-ups are thinking about this and there are and
Yeah.
solutions will be found.
Yeah, absolutely. I know consultancies that are working in this space, and they are genuinely looking at the solutions beyond the physical data center. So that's important. And looking at more catchment wide solutions and how you might integrate with other stakeholders in the catchment to offer a more sustainable data center. The other annoying thing about data centers is typically where you might want to put them is not necessarily where you've got a big fiber infrastructure, i.e., a city. So there's a lot of variables at play with where you site a data center.
Thanks. Simon, I've got one more question before I let you go. What is the next thing that we should be talking about right now that we haven't talked about today?
I think there's more to come from an engineering perspective in modular design and parametric design. And by that, I mean you design a process and ideally then a process that can be built off-site. And you've probably heard of modular buildings, Rob, and you've probably seen them on grand designs and various other bits and pieces. Think of that from an engineering process point of view. There's already a couple of companies in the UK doing quite a lot of process design for water on a modular basis, built off-site, literally transported to site, craned into position, plumbed in, and you're up and running. But I think the bit where AI tools come in is to take that design, that modular design, be able to give it new parameters, both with inlet, outlet conditions, types of flow, etc., pressure, temperature. Perhaps you can give it different environmental conditions where it's going to sit in its location, and it will redesign that module automatically for you at the click of a switch. Think of it as a parametric design for a staircase in a house. If you design it correctly with the right software, you're perhaps going up one story as you would in my house. All of a sudden, you want a staircase that's an extra 5 meters longer and 1 meter wide, 1 meter wider. You should be able to input that into a computer system and it should be able to scale like that and produce the engineering drawings and go straight through to automated cutting and assembly. Now, it's not that sufficient. That does happen in some industries. It's not there yet in our engineering world. The modular design is really coming through now because you can build in a factory environment. You can build perfect process plant and then just ship it to site. But the piece perhaps of interest to yourself, Rob, and the listeners to this is the software, the AI solutions around that. And then how do you put those guardrails in place? Someone's come along and put new parameters in, and it's just drawn up and churned out all the engineering drawings needed and all the parts lists and everything else for this new module. It's 50% bigger for a slightly different fluid composition coming in. How do you check that? Where does the engineer go to check what's been done? I mean, do they then slow the process down again by going through every single hard copy drawing, checking every dimension? Can that be automated as well? Uh, I know in your world you would look to automate some elements of software checking. Great. Well, think of that from a physical engineering perspective, from a pipes and pumps and heat exchangers. How does that happen as well? So, yeah, that's where I think we should be going. I think it'll get there. I think it'll get there.
Yeah, there's still an important role for the human in the loop. The biggest challenge is understanding where in the loop the human should go, and I think that's still an important consideration across all sorts of different industries.
Yeah, does that human in the loop come in at several stages in the loop? So there are almost traditional sort of stage gates type development process where there is a human in the loop at stages so it can be managed, or is it at the very end when you're just about to press go on a build and there's an intensive human interaction there, and through what vehicle?
Well, thank you, Simon. Thank you for your time today. I always enjoy your energy and the innovative thinking that you bring to anything that's in front of you, as I'm sure your clients and your colleagues will continually attest to. So, yeah, really appreciate your time and yeah. Let's speak again soon.
Definitely will, Rob. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.